good friend of mine from high school met Bethany through the Twitterverse, and they've actually never met in person and only sort of know one another. And my high school friend connected Bethany and I together, and she was like, I'm really interested in period poverty, sort of all things menstrual. And I was like, me too. I am somebody who often describes myself as that weird girl sitting in the corner of a classroom talking about sex. So it was really exciting to meet another version of me who's working on menstrual health, menstrual equity, but from a more medical standpoint instead of a more like social science standpoint. So we had a call back in August of this year of 2021, and we hit it off, and our brains kind of think alike and just kind of ran with it. She's like, I was thinking about starting a Twitter feed where we do a tweetorial every week. And I was like, yes, oh my gosh, what about this idea and this idea and this idea? So I think it's a really nice blending of the sort of hard medical sciences and then the social sciences. So understanding like the hows and whys, and then like what is actually happening to people's bodies on a very biological basis. So it's one of those things where I'm always like, reach out when those Twitter randos reach out to you, respond, because sometimes really beautiful things are brought to life. Things that stands out is just how somebody like me who is really aware of like reproductive health needs, sexual health needs, things like that, just hadn't put the connection together. And if I'm somebody who's kind of enmeshed in this community and in this work, and it didn't occur to me, it's probably not occurring to a lot of other people to be thinking about this. And then also just the sheer number of people that are affected, and that it's not discussed, and like leading into these ideas of like medical invisibility that's partly due to people's gender identity and gender expression and things like that. Because we know that women or femme-bodied people, a lot of times in the medical world, when they're talking to their doctors, aren't listened to, right? So, and especially like around menstrual things, it's very sometimes taboo and stigmatized to talk about. And so you're only going to like your parent or your sister for information, and you don't necessarily think that there's something that you should be asking about. So just the thing that I'm like overall and constantly struck by is just how nobody's really talking about this and how nobody's really sort of doing this work. So it's a really great partnership between Dr. Period Hackers and the National Hemophilia Foundation that we're working to kind of bring this topic to the forefront, to get people thinking about it, get people who are living with the blood or bleeding disorder educated, and helping them advocate for themselves when they're talking to their providers. And then helping providers also be aware of what's going on, what they should be asking, things they should be aware of. My line of research, sort of one of the overarching themes, is helping people normalize conversations around sex, reproductive health, and what's happening with their bodies, and what that interaction between patient and provider looks like in that room. So the first thing I think that people need to realize when they're talking about their health is that you should be going to doctors that you feel comfortable with. If you don't feel comfortable talking to your doctor about these very kind of personal and private things, regardless of what it is, whether it's something sexual in nature, reproductive in nature, or menstrual in nature, or if you feel uncomfortable telling them that you have a sore throat, find a new doctor. Find a doctor that you feel comfortable disclosing to. Because people don't often think about that interaction as a very kind of personal interaction. And there's sometimes just people you don't feel comfortable opening up to. So that's the first thing that I tell people. If you can't advocate for yourself because you don't feel comfortable, you don't want to disclose things about yourself, you can find a different doctor who you can disclose those things to, you can feel a bit more comfortable with. The second thing is to keep track of what's going on with your body and understand what's normal for you and what it looks like on a day-to-day basis. So that way, you know, is this pain I'm experiencing different than the usual pain I experience? Is this menstrual cycle heavier than a menstrual cycle than I usually experience? Because we don't often think back, and it's part of people's recall bias, where we think, oh no, like I don't really remember what's happened in the future, or I'm sorry, I don't really remember what's happened in the past. We can't remember what's happened in the future. I wish I could see time that way, but I can't. We don't always think about what happens in the past. And then we also, as humans, just sort of assume that the things that we're experiencing now the relative health, the relative good health that we have now, are just going to be things that always sort of endure in the future. And that's not the case. Our bodies change, we grow, we age, things just change. And so understanding what's normal to you when you go into that interaction with your provider, and you can talk to them about, like, this is the change that I am seeing, and here's how it's different for me, is really important because it's unique to you. And maybe the change isn't, or like the new thing that you're experiencing isn't something to be concerned about, but if it concerns you because it's outside of your realm of normal, I think that's really important. And then the other thing is, I think patients really need to be educated about not only what their normal is, but what normal is in general. And I think that's where Dr. Period Hackers can really step in and help, is because a lot of people don't know what's normal, especially around menstrual health. They only have their experiences of any sisters or femme-identified siblings or parents. And we know that there is a lot that plays in genetically, and people who are related tend to have some more similar kind of experiences. So maybe it's normal to that family, but on the larger spectrum, it's maybe on one of the two extremes of normal or something like that.